Hello and welcome everybody to this Cosmos Society interview. And we're delighted to welcome Bettina Joy de Guzman, who is a multi-instrumentalist and classicist who composes with replica ancient music instruments with ancient poetry based on her research. And she has she's also an educator, having taught ancient languages, history, and mythology. She's president of the California Classical Association South and organizes panels. And she's also in 2021 was both an associate and visiting artist for the Center for Hellenic Studies at Harvard University. So welcome, Bettina. Thank you. And we're going to start with talking a little bit about your recent project for performing the Iliad. I'd like to hear a little more about that. So, Janet.
Hi, Bettina. Welcome. What inspired you to perform the Iliad?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here in this space. I'm very excited to talk about this project. What inspired me is just simply that it doesn't exist. The whole 15,693 lines sung, recorded, doesn't exist anywhere. And so looking back as an educator, as well as the time when I was a graduate student, when I just wanted to hear what does it sound like, and it didn't exist, I knew someday I would want to tackle this project, and that someday is now.
So how did you start to prepare for this?
Well, all these years of just reading everything I could about Homeric studies. First of all that is pre-prep, really. But then I started scanning, metrically scanning the Iliad, and that took time. It's taken like 6 months with life and work and everything to get through Iliad scroll 20, and so I'm almost done with Iliad scroll 21. Now scanning it, aside from reading everything, and there's so much Homeric studies out there to read, has really slowed me down, so I could start thinking about what do I think about the characters, the language, the diction, the rhythm, and then singing it slowed me down even further and made me really reflect what's going on. And wow, I have many thoughts now concerning performance. The biggest one is I'm no longer convinced that the whole thing was ever sung. I'm still going to do it because it's sort of like an experimental archaeology at this point. Like, it is experimental. And I still want to do it. It's going to take me longer than the 365 days I had anticipated. I had anticipated 320 days, thinking I was going to sing 40 to 60 lines a day. But the preparation time really has to do with defining the characters and trying to find the drama within each few lines. And that took a lot more energy and study. I didn't want to there are these marathons that you hear about where people just do the Iliad in 24 hours. And unless you have very skilled actors doing it, to crush it all in a certain space of time is much work. Now imagine singing it, because you're there to also entertain. And that is the purpose that I think most people have forgotten, that you have to imagine what was the main reason that they were singing it. They were singing to entertain. I mean, to educate perhaps, but it's entertainment. You're learning about these, the people, the place, whatever was going on at the time. And so I do have to put in the musical flourishes for myself, so I'm not bored, because if I'm bored, the audience is going to get bored. And so I decided to make themes for each new character coming in. So there's an Agamemnon theme, Achilles, Thetis, Athena. Now I will clump them together, Athena and the gods, Apollo and the gods when he's behaving this way. Nestor had his own theme, which was very successful. It was the most successful one. There were like 460 views on YouTube with a Nestor theme during his speech in book one, which amazed me. I'm thinking people want to hear about Nestor. How interesting. So I've put up through line 284. I'm just on scroll one, and people are commenting and engaging with me on Twitter, asking about it. What's the process? I'm very glad I have this space. It's been a process. Yeah.
Yes, Bettina, I was wondering, how do you do it when you are recording? You know, you have to think about the music, you play the lyre, you have to think about that, you have the scansion, and then the content. So how do you do it? To me, it looks impossible to do all of that.
It is so much work. It is so much work to prepare. It is exactly like preparing. It is exactly as hard as you think it is. It is. So I do have to think about what's going on in the scene. So as I've mentioned, I have to prepare the music ahead of time and practice it. And then I think of the content, and then I'm keeping the meter. I am in fact doing dactylic hexameter. That's what I promised everybody. I'm going to do dactylic hexameter the entire time. Now I do it slowly. I will slow down and speed up, but I do it. And I also even do pitches most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. Like I will follow a circumflex. I will follow the accent aigu. You know, I will, and I'll try to. Because I do think it has meaning when it's going up. Like, why is it rising? Why is this a rising moment? But of course, the accents also help with the scansion. All those are in my mind. And every performance I do is always a little bit different because my mood is telling me to make the music do this. It is so very difficult. It's a lot of prep time. And that's why the Iliad a day became Iliad every few days. Because I sometimes would record and go, oh, that didn't sound convincing. He didn't sound angry enough in this part. Let me do it again so he sounds angry. Or I'll change my mind and go, is he being angry or is he being just inquisitive? Like, is it more of an internal struggle? So I am actually really thinking about each character. What is the intent of the character at this moment? And it's the actor's problem, really, where the actor has to wonder, what is the purpose? And an actor will wake up one day and go, oh, no, I changed my mind. I would say it this way the next day. And that's exactly right. It will always be a different performance. And I think that's the beauty of it. It will always be a different interpretation daily according to your new thoughts, your new perspectives that day. So that's one. And the other is the musical thing. What mood am I in? Am I feeling that somehow this should be a more playful moment? That mood delivers itself in the music too. And I'm doing something. It's an improvisation in many levels. I found, okay, so here's another thing I found, that the audience retention, because it shows it in YouTube. If I start it the same way, the musical flourishes exactly the same way as I did the last time, they're bored. They're like, oh, she's singing the same thing. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Actually, it's different. But how can I prove it? So I'm like, okay, every time it has to be a different intro. That's a lot. So how many performances are going to happen? 365 performances. The intro is going to be different just a little bit every time so that they feel like, oh, this is a new section. This is going to be something new and different. And I really believe that the audience back then, whether it's Archaic Age or Bronze Age, they wanted something fresh every time too when they sat back down. They went out to get a drink. They came down. They went to relieve themselves. And they're back in the 6-hour feast. Oh, is he singing the same song? Oh, no, he's not. Hang on. And their ear, perks up a little bit. I have to think that for the audience as well. So it is exactly as difficult as you made it sound like. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so happy you answered the question, because it was bugging me, because we're doing Iliad 18 and at the beginning, with Thetis and Achilles, and I said, how does she do it? The moving part. Yeah.
And let's not forget the uh, just the scansion
Hmm.
portion, because it's not as easy as it is. Like, okay, most of the time, yes, I can do it like this, but then sometimes I'm like, what? That didn't add up, and I'm like, okay, oh, all right, that's an interesting illusion. Oh, and it happens twice. Why? Why here? Things, simple things like in Greek, unless you have the helpful accents, and you know it pretty well, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm thinking, is the epsilon here an e, or is it an ei? Because that would change the meter, and then you have it eliding into, you have an eta eliding into an alpha, and you're like, oh, okay, all right. I mean, that happens, but then you get like within one, and it smushes together. You have an epsilon omega, and you're supposed to pronounce it yo. You're like, but I don't do that all the other times. I didn't do it that last time, and now I'm doing it this way, and I only know that because it scans that way. And so there's lots of books I keep looking at, going, all right, why is that happening? Is there any reason? No, it just because it scans that. Okay, so I have to make such decisions, and not everybody's going to agree with my pronunciations, and that's fine. That's okay. I'm waiting for comments. I'm good. I'm ready to listen, and I hope I encourage the next generation to try such a crazy thing and do it better, right? That's the hope of teachers. Is this is the first time. It's going to be a failed attempt in many ways and for many reasons. But the next few, I mean, imagine the next time somebody tries to sing the whole thing and record it. Oh, it's going to be so much better than my version. Goodness, and that's how it should be, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You are posting your progress on Twitter. What sort of reactions have you had?
Oh, so I'm posting them on Twitter as well as on YouTube. On Twitter, it's more like people are just retweeting it. There's actually they're very positive on Twitter. I have about 6,700 followers there, and they're retweeting it, and I keep waiting for negative comments to come in, and they haven't come in so far. So it's interesting, right? But I'm thinking, of course, that the more lines I do, at some point they will come in. I know that if I put it on Facebook, where there are more, so it's a very different audience on Facebook. I know that there will be more negative reaction and review there. Now the question is, do I want to waste my time on that, negotiating that? Which audience am I talking to? I'm staying with the Twitter audience. They seem to be very friendly scholars there and very supportive of each other. So I'm just waiting, what are their thoughts? So far, I've heard, wow, this is fantastic. I didn't think that Agamemnon is going to be so interesting, or I've never really looked at this passage before. This reminds me that I need to reread the Iliad, which is actually really what I want. Like, yes, please read the Iliad and tell me your thoughts about it. I invited many scholars on YouTube. I've interviewed them, so the Iliad commentaries is part of that. It's really supposed to be one big package, and I think really their commentaries are the comments that are being generated by this project. So, for instance, there's Peter Campbell, who's an underwater archaeologist, and when I was asking him, so Iliad commentaries, what can you possibly say? He says, I don't know, what can I say? I said, well, I'm going to ask you, did you find monsters? Because you do shipwrecks. did you find monsters? Did you find vessels, Bronze Age vessels? Did you find Bronze Age artifacts down there? What do you think of the sirens? Any evidence of that and what's going on? And it was a very interesting interview. You know, the short answer is no monsters, unfortunately. But you know, it's fascinating because that's the sort of thing you do wonder, right? Like, well, if you're diving under, do you ever find any evidence of Nereids or anything at all? And then, of course, he went on and talked about shipwrecks that he did find, which is fascinating. I've spoken with Andy West, who wrote about teaching classics in prison, and he wrote a book called The Life Inside. And I asked him what he thought about the Iliad and the Odyssey and how it was like teaching people who were incarcerated what they thought of that. So that's, you know, so I'm trying to find the different perspectives and how people are receiving it, the reception of all this. And then you get the different angles on the Iliad, like the generosity in the Iliad, the times when they're giving and receiving. What does that mean in terms of power play? So that's interesting. And how about, so far I've interviewed about 14 scholars, and 10 are out there on YouTube. So it's something to take a look at. And along with that, I started also speaking the ancient Greek and the English together, just lines at a time, just softly, so that I'm thinking, what would I want to hear if I'm walking around the house, and I just want like a friendly voice reading it to me in ancient Greek and in English, so I'll remember if I'm a student. So I'm reading it in that way, not in a big dramatic way, because there are YouTubes of that, which is wonderful, but that's not what I'm doing. So I keep trying to make it accessible, the Iliad commentary, the singing, and the delivery of it, and the speaking it public for an audience. I'm trying to think in terms of probably well, no, you know, I can't really say that there's if a student is ready to read the Iliad, then they're ready to hear this commentary. You know, you have to engage with it. So
well, that sounds fantastic. Which parts that you've looked at so far, which parts have touched you personally in most emotionally? Which you find you most moving?
Always and forever, anything relating to Thetis and Achilles. So anytime I come across that, because it's her son, the son of Thetis is the hero of this epic, and it's I just had spoken to Lucia Nixon from Wolfson College, Oxford University last night about this, the making the gods human, relatable at least, right? So there are mothers in the Iliad, and they're the gods. There's Dione, Leto, Aphrodite. When Aeneas is involved, she's there. So there's actually generational mothers, and that is so. Anytime the mothers are concerned about their children, whether they're half god or they're gods, I find it very interesting. What happens to them? How do they care for them? So very touching moments when it's an emotional response. That is one speaking to Achilles, trying to comfort him, or Aphrodite trying to rescue her son who's wounded, or when Dione is trying to heal Aphrodite. It's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So, and then of course there's the shield of Achilles in Iliad 18. Iliad 18, just there's like 3 instances when there's musical instruments involved and singing and dancing. That's in Iliad 18. What else is in Iliad 18? Well, we get Hephaestus making it, and his golden robots with their automaton. They are made to serve the gods. That's very fascinating. You get the story of Thetis and Hephaestus and how she rescued him at a certain point in time, also in Iliad 18. So Iliad 18 is fascinating for those reasons. Iliad 6 is, as Rebecca Futo Kennedy had said, like a mini game epic, if you can almost imagine. Hector, on his quest around the city, he has to find this, and this, and talk to these people before he goes and fights Achilles. So it's a look into Hector as not a warrior, but as a person. What does he do? What does he do when he's not fighting? And book one, because all the characters are introduced, and you get the reasons for the fight, and you get Nestor coming in saying, don't fight. You get Athena coming in saying, don't kill Agamemnon, Achilles. And that was a moment, can you imagine? Like, what a plot twist. Like a complete alternate reality. If he did, there's no Iliad. There's no talk. And anything Apollo, for 9 years, what has he been doing? And suddenly the 10th year, he decides he's on the Trojan side. And throughout the entire Iliad, he's on the Trojan side. Very interesting. So those have taken my attention.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. We have a group led by Hélène, who are translating and looking at the Iliad, and at the moment we're on Iliad 18. So those insights are going to be really useful for that group. And thank you so much for sharing all that information and insights about performance and how that's shaping not only your view, but perhaps other people's views of the Iliad. So I hope lots of people will continue to follow your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for